Can you give us a Centrelink update, if you can, on the number of people who have asked for help since last week?
Well, at the moment, we're just going through all of the people who've registered in intent to claim, because we had such a high number of people wanting to get onto the system last week. Instead of making people go through the whole process, we enabled them to just register an intent to claim, and so we'll be going through those this week. So we can get back to those people and go through their full processing, including getting them that identification number that everyone was talking about last week, the CRN number. But last week we saw hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people register an intent to claim. And
right.
So hopefully this week we'll be able to get a better handle on how many of those were registering that intent and genuinely actually needed immediate assistance, and how many of those were registering an intent because they were fearful they might lose their job.
Okay, so is the system running smoothly now?
Look, we've supercharged the system. Certainly these are unprecedented times, and I'm sure there'll be other times when we actually get huge demand onto the system, but things seem to be working much better. And I'd particularly like to thank Australians who are not going into Centrelink now and who are using the telephones and the online provisions, even though they might be a little bit slower and the wait times might be a little bit longer. It's much safer and to be able to be doing it from home than lining up at Centrelink. So things are improving significantly, but we certainly thank Australians for their patience under these extraordinary levels of demand.
Yeah. Has the government, meanwhile, Minister, decided yet on welfare payments paid to temporary visa holders and non-citizens?
At the moment, we're working our way through all people that are in Australia and working out how we can support them over the coming months. As you would probably realise, there is no sort of one application for everybody. Different visa holder types already have different access to payment. One of the things that we did do immediately on Monday night was to make payment eligibility for those people who are on their pathway to Australian citizenship in Australia at the moment. So those people that are residents, they're on residence type visas and they're just serving out their waiting periods. We waive those waiting periods so they will immediately get access. But there are so many different visa types. But today or last night, the Prime Minister made the announcements in relation to emergency relief. We will make sure that we look after all people that are in Australia during the coming months.
Okay, so they will be looked after, those visa holders and non-citizens. I mean, there is some suggestion that they should be paid about $550 a fortnight, just like apprentices are. Is that an appropriate figure?
Well, look, we're currently monitoring all visa types as we're monitoring everything that's happening so that we can respond as quickly as possible. And last Monday, the Parliament actually gave me powers to be able to react quite quickly. At the moment, we're working through a range of issues with the Cabinet so that we can respond to the situation as it unfolds over the coming days. And we saw what happened last week. It was just unprecedented, the speed with which things happened. And so we'll continue to monitor that and make sure that we're there to help people. But it's great that we're not seeing the kinds of lines that we did last week in front of Centrelink. That's really, really positive.
Were you even blindsided by the sheer volume of people needing help, Minister?
Look, I don't think anybody predicted the increase in demand on Monday of last week following the announcements following the National Cabinet. We certainly were ramping up, and we've been ramping up now for months because we realised that this was a potential outcome. But I don't think it was a matter of being blindsided. I think it was just a matter of pure capacity. No one was ever going to be able to have the kind of capacity to be when we were hit with 200,000 people in an hour. I mean, it just is eye-watering the kind of capacity you would have to have for that. But we've increased capacity, and we've also seen to have flattened out the demand. So hopefully we'll be able to give people who need to access our services a much less stressful experience this week than we saw early last week.
Right. The Prime Minister had said last week that he fears that more people will die from other factors at the moment, aside from the disease. So we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about alcoholism, suicide, all of that. And we had Julia Gillard on the show from Beyond Blue a short time ago who kind of echoed those sentiments. What are you most concerned about in the coming weeks and months ahead when it comes to that?
Well, we're obviously concerned that all Australians feel comfortable and confident that there's somebody out there supporting them, and that could, turn out to be a range of different things and supports that we put in place. Yesterday, the Prime Minister and Minister Hunt made some announcements in relation to extra support for mental health, which I'm sure was greatly welcomed by the community. I had a couple of packages that went through yesterday in relation to domestic violence, because we do see that domestic violence is something that sadly we'll probably see a significant increase as people have to self-isolate and find themselves in confined spaces, and also the emergency relief and food relief package, so that we can assist people. But we are very, very aware that it is going to be a very trying time for all Australians over the coming months, and whilst the government will and is doing everything it possibly can, we also are going to have to rely on the community and society to support each other through this really tough time, because you can't just rely entirely on the government. There's not enough of us. So if you've got a neighbour who lives alone, perhaps maybe just give them a call and make sure that they're okay. If you know somebody who's particularly vulnerable, pick up the phone. Don't go around there. But, if you know that they are particularly vulnerable and, maybe don't cook, when you make dinner tonight, make a little bit extra and drop it around on their front doorstep. I think this is the kind of thing that we'd like to see from Australians, and we'll back you in as the government where we possibly can.
Do you think that there should be limitations placed on the purchase of alcohol?
Well, I noticed that Western Australia did put a limitation on the purchase of alcohol because they saw a significant run on demand. I suppose it's a bit like food in Australia. There is no shortage of food in Australia, and there never will be. We produce 3 times as much food as we consume. In fact, it's more likely we're going to end up in an oversupply situation. And equally, there should be no need for people to be stocking up on alcohol. But equally, in these tough times, maybe it's time, everyone should have a think about, what their behaviour and how their behaviour is going to affect the people that are around them, particularly when you have to go home, when you have to socially isolate. Think about your family members around you and how your behaviour is going to impact on them.
I guess my point being that, people are very stressed out at the moment. They might lose their job for whatever reason. They might turn to alcohol in quite an increasing way, and in that sense, people are being told to stay at home, which should be the safest place, but for many people it's the exact opposite.
And that's why we'll put in place a range of services, including phone lines and online presence, to make sure that people have got access to kind of services